cause. He served a total of 7 to 8 days in jail. He had some rap song that was in the top 100 rap songs in America, and he couldn't take the deal because he'd give up his rap career. He ended up getting a life sentence because they certified under Section 851 the priors. My hands are tied. You know, I am not ashamed to say I went home and cried that night.
I think you're not a fan of mandatory minimums.
You know, I grew up in a system where the judge had pretty much unfettered discretion, and if you've lived in a place where you can sentence people the way you think is just, and then you come to a place where there are mandatory minimums, it's a little tough.
Thank you very much. Nothing's clear. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just have one question. As a matter of fact, it is a follow-up, and I think I know the answer now that you've just spoken to Senator Hirono. From your very extensive experience as a prosecutor and as a judge, as you remarked, in every potential jurisdiction within your state that you could, I take it you would recommend that we as a Congress and as a committee, the Judiciary Committee, undertake sentencing reform that would untie the hands of judges and give them the kind of discretion that you wish you had in that case.
You know, I don't think judges are in the business of recommending to members of Congress what they ought to do, but if you look at my history and the comments I've made in sentencing, I think that the answer is clear.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Erickson. I said Senator Erickson. Judge Erickson, congratulations to you and your family. You're dismissed at this point.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Would the next people come to the table, please? Before you receive it, will you all raise your right hand? Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give before the committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
We'll start with each of you to take this. We'll have each of you testify first with your opening statements and introduction of family and friends, and then we'll go to questions. So would you start?
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Grassley.
Yeah, turn the red light should be on. Or the green light, I guess.
Thank you, Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Feinstein for holding this hearing. And I'd like to thank Senator Hatch, especially for those very kind remarks that he made earlier. It truly is an honor to return to this committee. I learned so much working for Senator Hatch many years ago on this committee. I have tremendous respect for him and for all of the important work that you all do on this committee, and it's a pleasure to be back here. I'd like to thank President Trump for nominating me to the United States District Court for the District of Columbia, the court on which I clerked some 25 years ago. If I am so fortunate to be confirmed to this position, I will have the extraordinary honor of serving alongside my role model, my mentor, and the judge for whom I clerked, Judge Thomas F. Hogan. I'd like to introduce the family members who I have here today with me. They include my husband, Matt, and our 2 children, Taylo and John. I'd like to thank Matt especially for his unwavering support and for his guidance throughout the years. And I'd like to thank our children for their continual encouragement and for their willingness to endure yet another cross-country move. I'd also like to introduce my mother, Patsy Langhorne, who's here from Pensacola, Florida. Unfortunately, neither my father, Henry Langhorne, nor my older twin brothers, John and Henry Langhorne, can be here today. However, they are watching from afar, and I want to thank them too for their endless support and encouragement. I was very fortunate to be raised in Pensacola, Florida, by a large and loving family, by grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, all of whom played a big role in raising me, and I regret that not all can be here today. Finally, I'd like to thank the many dear friends who have supported me in this process. And again, I thank the committee for taking time out of your busy schedules to hold this hearing, and I look forward to your questions.
Mr. Schwartz. Push the green button if you have.
I have. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Feinstein, members of the committee, it is an honor to be here today. I thank the President for nominating me, and I thank you for giving me the opportunity to answer your questions. I'm joined by several members of my family. First and foremost is my wife, Courtney. Courtney and I went to the same college. We were both Yale undergrads, but we met here in D.C. Courtney was in a fellowship program with a law school friend of mine who emailed me one day to say that she had a coworker she wanted me to meet. Only later I learned that they had met at a social function and had talked for 5 or 10 minutes, at which point my friend announced not only that Courtney needed to meet me, but that if we got past the first date, we would get married. And that first date was 7 happy years ago this month. I'm pleased to say that Courtney is not a lawyer, but a consultant at Deloitte, where she works with federal agencies. With her is the newest addition to our family, Edward Schwartz, who was born less than a month ago on June 29th, which is also his mother's birthday. Edward has an older brother, Daniel Schwartz, who is 22 months old. He's a fine fellow, he's good company, you all would like him, but on mature reflection, he indicated that today's proceedings would probably not be to his taste, and so he respectfully sends his regrets to the chairman. My parents are Richard Stephen Schwartz and Emma Roth Schwartz of Winona, Minnesota, where I grew up. They're unfortunately unable to be here today. My mother can no longer travel for health reasons, and my father has stayed at home to help care for her. I understand that he's able to watch online, though, and I know he's very happy to know that I'm here. I'm also happy to have the company of my brother George. George is a captain in the Army Special Forces who served tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, among other places. He's here from Philadelphia, where he's transitioning from active duty, and he's recently started a business and environmental studies program at Wharton. I'm fortunate also to have the best and kindest and most supportive in-laws I could have hoped for. My mother and father-in-law, Susan and Steve Long of Columbus, Indiana, made sure to come for the occasion. I know that I have a number of friends and colleagues, past and present, in the audience and watching online. I'm grateful and I'm touched by their support and their confidence. It's the greatest honor of my professional career to be nominated to the Court of Federal Claims. I have no further statement, and I look forward to the committee's questions.
Mr. Benchkowski.
Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Feinstein, and members of the committee, thank you for holding this hearing today to consider my nomination. It's good to be back in this room after 7 years away, although I must confess it's a little bit different being at this witness table for the first time. I also want to thank the President and the Attorney General for the confidence they've placed in me by making this nomination. I'd like to begin by acknowledging family members who are here today. Behind me is my wife, Christy Remington, and our almost 5-year-old son, Andrew, who we call Drew. Christy's a familiar face to many on this committee, and those of you who know her understand that she's a talented, forthright, and effective lawyer and advocate for her clients. She's also a wonderful and caring wife and mom, and I couldn't imagine spending my life with anyone else. Drew's a fantastic little boy, and I'm grateful that he has the opportunity to get an early civics lesson here in the Judiciary Committee. Today's the first time that he's worn a coat and tie, and he's a bit resistant to the whole endeavor. At this age, he's more interested in cars and trucks than advice and consent, so I apologize in advance if his attention span ends up being shorter than the hearing itself. Also here from Trumbull, Connecticut, is my mom, Elaine Benchkowski. My mom rose from her first job in the docket room of the United States Tax Court here in Washington to later serve as the division manager of the Federal Bankruptcy Court in Bridgeport, Connecticut, all without the benefit of a college education, much less a fancy law degree. I've always said that my mom could have been anything she wanted in life, and she chose at a young age to be a great mother who also worked outside of the home to help support our family. My father, Robert Benchkowski, passed away in 2009 during my service to this committee. I'll never forget and will always be grateful for the expressions of support that I received from members and staff on both sides of the aisle during that time. My dad also was a public servant who dedicated his career to helping those addicted to alcohol and drugs. including here in Washington at the old DC General Hospital, as well as at nonprofits in Stamford and Ansonia, Connecticut. My dad taught me the value of hard work, the importance of compassion, particularly for those who struggle in life, and the importance of giving back through public service. I'm sure if he were here today, he'd be proud that his son had been asked to serve once again at the Department of Justice. I also want to mention my Aunt Dana Cardoni and her son, my cousin Doug Cardoni. Both have traveled all the way from Northern California to be here, and I'm grateful for their support. My brother Barry, his wife Jody, and their daughters Caroline, Sarah, and Amanda live in Oxford, Connecticut. Caroline is here, but the rest of the family did not make the trip, and I suspect they may be watching this on the internet, and I wanted to say hi to them as well. If confirmed, this will be my 6th leadership position at the Department of Justice. I served previously as Chief of Staff for the department's 2 top leaders, as well as at a federal law enforcement agency, ATF. I also ran the Office of Legislative Affairs and managed the department's interactions with this committee and other committees of Congress, and served as the staff director in the Office of Legal Policy. Serving at the department again would be a tremendous honor. I care deeply about our institutions of government and their proper functioning, particularly the role that the department and the criminal division play in upholding and defending the rule of law in America. Every day, the career attorneys in the division vigorously and ethically enforce federal law while protecting the civil rights and civil liberties of all Americans. My job managing and leading the criminal division will be to listen to and respect these career prosecutors and to work hard to ensure that they have the necessary resources and support to perform their critical mission. Throughout my career, I've developed a reputation as someone who's been fair, honest, and independent-minded during my service to the Department of Justice. If confirmed, I will work hard to maintain and zealously guard that reputation, as well as the institutional integrity and independence of the department. In doing so, I'll be guided by my own experience and the advice I received from fantastic colleagues during my previous service to the department. But I also intend to live by the words of former Attorney General Robert Jackson, who in his timeless 1940 speech, the federal prosecutor noted that public safety, quote, lies in the prosecutor who tempers zeal with human kindness, who seeks truth and not victims, who serves the law and not factional purposes, and who approaches the task with humility. If I'm confirmed to head the criminal division, you have my commitment to work hard to live up to these important values every single day that I'm on the job. I thank you for holding this hearing today. I realize that there will be questions, particularly about my representation of a particular client. I want to thank the chairman and ranking member and their staffs for the care and communication that they've displayed to me during the last several weeks as we've worked through this issue. I will endeavor to be as open and transparent as I possibly can about that work, and I look forward to your questions.
And I'll start at that point, Mr. Beckhouse. Our staff's learned that you played a part in representing Alpha Bank, a Russian bank. You disclosed this information in a standard interview with the FBI. They performed the task with all potential nominees, and you were asked about any foreign contacts. My staff and Senator Feinstein's staff called you several times to ask you questions about the scope of your representation, and you thoroughly answered our questions. However, because we'd like to be able to ask you similar questions in a public setting, you have waived your confidentiality to private information. We learned from your background investigation materials and agreed to discuss your representation here today. So I'd like to start with that matter. As I and other senators ask you questions about this, we recognize that you won't be able to divulge client-attorney privilege conversations. Our questions will be about the general nature of your work, not specific advice that you gave. How did you come to represent Alpha Bank, and what was the scope of your work?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alpha Bank came to my firm as a client in March of this year. The work was brought in by another partner, Viet Din, a longtime colleague of mine who I've known for about 20 years. I learned of the representation after the client relationship had been established when Mr. Din called me and asked me to supervise and oversee an internal investigation in connection with that representation. The The scope of that work involved examining some computer traffic that occurred on the bank's systems in February and March of 2017. In connection with that, we hired a forensic investigations firm called Strauss Friedberg, which is a US-based forensics company, very well respected, started by former FBI agents and former assistant United States attorneys. My job was to oversee Strauss's work, to set the scope of their investigative mandate, to remain in contact with them throughout the course of their investigation to understand what they were finding, and essentially ensure that their work was proceeding apace. And it's something that I've done many times in the course of the last 7 years as an attorney in private practice. If you read my questionnaire, I noted in that questionnaire that a part of my practice during the course of my time at Kirkland & Ellis has been conducting internal investigations on behalf of myriad clients. And so this was in complete keeping with that kind of work that I performed in private practice.
Okay. To your knowledge, is Alpha Bank under investigation by the federal government?
I don't know the ultimate answer to that question, Mr. Chairman, but I can tell you during the course of my work for Alpha Bank, I didn't come into possession of any information or any suggestion that the government was investigating Alpha Bank. Quite to the contrary, we conducted this review with a view towards taking the results to the FBI and to the Justice Department, which is what the client and my partner did.
If you're confirmed, how will you handle any matters that may involve Alpha Bank that will come before the criminal division?
Well, Mr. Chairman, as I've explained, and Senator Feinstein, you referenced this during your opening statement, and I want to be perfectly clear about this. This is one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation in an open setting. I have a 2-year recusal obligation as to any client, any former client, the moment I go into the Justice Department. And so I will be recused from any matter involving Alpha Bank for the first 2 years of my tenure at the department if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed. With respect to this particular matter, this investigation that we conducted for Alpha Bank, if the subject matter of that investigation in some way comes before me in the criminal division at any point during my tenure, I want to be clear, I will recuse from that completely.
I'm going to reserve my time and call on Senator Feinstein.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Benchkowski, your work at Alpha Bank, I think, makes pretty clear that you're steeped in the issues the whole world has been watching and that relate to Special Counsel Mueller's investigation. You oversaw Alpha Bank's investigation into any links with its servers and the Trump Organization. You reviewed the Steele dossier for the benefit of Alpha Bank. If confirmed, as you said, you are required to recuse from any matters involving Alpha Bank, but just for 2 years. My staff asked if you would commit to extending your recusal from Alpha Bank matters and any matters within Special Counsel Mueller's review. You agreed to consider only a limited extended recusal from Alpha Bank. My understanding is that you refused to commit to recusing from matters under the Special Counsel's investigation. So let's ask these questions. First, why did you refuse to recuse yourself?
Senator, Senator, I'm happy to clear this up. I didn't steadfastly refuse to recuse myself. What I've committed to do beyond, because I don't know what's in Special Prosecutor Mueller's investigation. I'm a lawyer in private practice. I have no idea what he's up to other than what I read in the papers. I have committed on any matter that comes before me in the criminal division where I believe that I might have an ethical obligation to recuse myself, that I will consult the career ethics officials at the department on the facts that are in front of me, and if a recusal is called for, I'll make that recusal. If I could clarify something on the dossier. My work on that was very, very limited. I spent fewer than 5 hours on that matter while I was working for Alpha Bank, and here's what I did.
Let me, before you go on, do you have the whole dossier?
I read the dossier online as it was published on BuzzFeed.
The
I read
whole
the
dossier
I read
is not
the,
online.
No, the only thing that I have done, Senator, in that regard was read the 2 pages as to
You have
Alphabet.
not seen the whole document.
I have not. I have not. With respect to the dossier, I read the 2 pages of the dossier that were published online on BuzzFeed. And my partner asked me to read those 2 pages, to assume that all of the material facts in those 2 pages were false. And if that were the case, as a preliminary matter, because the client was interested in this topic, what would we say to them about whether a cause of action for defamation against BuzzFeed was viable? I didn't independently investigate any of the facts in that dossier. I frankly...
You do not know whether they're true or false.
I do not. And so my analysis was very limited. It was simply to review those facts, assume that they're false, and then give the client preliminary advice about whether they should move forward in thinking about a defamation action. I can't reveal what that advice was, but I just want you to understand that my review of that dossier was based on what was published online without any investigation of the underlying allegations or any other access to any other material.
I don't understand why you haven't agreed to recuse yourself from any of the Mueller investigation, because you were connected to the campaign.
Well, Senator, I played no role in the campaign. I had no title. I didn't advise the campaign. I didn't communicate with the campaign in any meaningful way. I didn't give any money. I didn't raise any money. I served as the head of the DOJ transition, which was a separate entity from the campaign. But I want to be clear, I played no role in the Trump campaign.
Okay, but the transition, you did play a role.
I did.
All right. Did anyone in the administration ever ask that you not commit to recuse yourself from matters within the special counsel's jurisdiction?
No, ma'am.
Last week, President Trump criticized Attorney General Sessions for recusing himself from the Russia investigation. During the course of your nomination, did anyone in the administration speak with you about recusal issues?
I had discussions with the Department of Justice, the career ethics officials there, in connection with my nomination to discuss potential recusals generally in the course of preparing my OGE materials that are submitted to this committee. But no one else had ever suggested to me or asked me to recuse or not recuse with respect to any matters.
Do you have any information on the Comey firing?
Do I have any information?
Yes, have you spoken? Have you been advised?
I told the staff in response to a question during the course of our discussions that I had one discussion in December of this year with then Senator Sessions about that subject. And I'd like to be able to put that in context a little bit.
Please do.
I was spending time talking to Senator Sessions because of my role in the transition and because of my history in working for the department and in his preparation for his, it was not in connection with his nomination hearings, but he was seeking to understand the role of the Attorney General, the role of the Deputy Attorney General, how the organizational chart at the department fit together. We were having long discussions about that and budget issues and management issues at the department generally, based on the preliminary work that I was doing on the transition. And in the course of those discussions, we had a sidebar conversation where he looked at me and said, "What do you think of the FBI director?" And I gave him my candid assessment as someone who has a history in working at the department. Like a lot of lawyers in Washington, I had views about the way the FBI director handled himself in the course of the Hillary Clinton investigation.
What was that candid assessment?
I told him that I thought that the FBI director had made several mistakes in the course of handling that investigation.
Did you say what the mistakes were?
I did.
And what were they?
I said that I thought that he had made a mistake in converting his role as FBI director into that of a prosecutor and making prosecutorial decisions that were rightfully should have been made at the department. I had real concerns about the press conference that he held, because in my experience at the Department of Justice, it was exceedingly rare and in fact, in my view, inappropriate for a prosecutor to give a press conference where they announce a non-indictment and then speak in the manner that he did about that. So I gave him my views, and he absorbed them. He didn't react to them, and we went back to talking about the other things that we were talking about on that day.
And why do you believe he asked you for your views?
I don't know. I think he was curious because as you know, I've known Senator Sessions and worked with Senator Sessions. There were a lot of people who had views on that subject, and Weirs particularly, who had worked at the department. I think he was curious as to my views, Senator.
What connection did Alpha Bank have with the Trump administration?
I know of no connection, Senator. There have been two reviews that have been done so far about server ties. My role and work for the bank was limited to a review of a second set of server activity that occurred in 2017. And in the course of that review, it was determined, it was Strauss-Friedberg's opinion, which they shared with me on the basis of their review of the technical data, that there was no communications link between the Trump organization and Alpha Bank. But that was the limit of the work that I did.
I didn't cut off Senator Feinstein. She has a meeting that she has to go to, and probably wouldn't be able to do a second round. So I hope everybody else understands that it's a privilege I gave her Senator Stats.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Tillis, for your deference. Ms. Friedrich and Mr. Schwartz, congratulations on your nominations, and congratulations on drawing a panel where you're probably going to get no questions today. You got the easy road at home. Mr. Benchikowski, thanks for being here. Thanks for your past service. I think it's widely known that there's lots of respect for you because of your past service to this committee and in this room, and many people know your personal integrity. And I think it's widely known that you love the Department of Justice and the rule of law as well. I think you also understand that the basis for many of the questions today are the fact that we're navigating a crisis of public trust. This isn't just about the last 6 months or the last 18 months. There's been a breakdown of trust in basic American democratic institutions for some time. And so I think a lot of the questions that are being asked today, while some of the dot connecting that's happening is not really accurate lines being drawn, I think the basis of most of the questions the basis is something that you well understand. And I think that a lot of the questions that are being asked by the other side today need to be fully explored. So I also have a lot of questions about Alpha Bank. My sense is you're not going to be able to answer many of those questions here. So I'd like to turn to a second set of issues about public trust that I think are on a lot of people's mind. Do you believe that Special Counsel Mueller is engaged in a witch hunt?
I do not.
Can you tell us about who Bob Mueller is in your view?
Bob Mueller is someone who I had the great good fortune of working with during my service at the Justice Department when he was FBI director. He has an admirable history of public service to our country, both as a Marine and as FBI director. He's someone who is widely understood to be a man of integrity, a man of independence, and someone who I believe will conduct his investigation with those characteristics right at the forefront. And I also believe that he'll insist on those same things from the people who work for him.
So you do not think that Mr. Mueller is a partisan hack?
Far from it, Senator.
Do you have any reason to doubt the intelligence community's assessment of Russian involvement in the 2016 election?
I do not. I read the 14 or so page declassified report of the intelligence community about that subject. I have no reason to doubt it. I find their conclusions deeply troubling.
Do you have any reason to doubt the decision-making of the current Attorney General with regard to his need to recuse from the Russia investigation?
Senator, I've known Jeff Sessions for a long time. I have every confidence, although I don't know what information he had at his disposal when he made that decision, I have every confidence that he reviewed the facts, he applied the law, and he made the right decision for the department on that basis.
Do you, can you tell us if you've ever had any conversations in the process of either the transition or your nomination where you've been asked to take a personal loyalty oath to President Trump?
I have not had any such conversation like that, Senator, and if such a personal loyalty oath were requested, it wouldn't have been given. I understand I've taken the oath of office in federal service many times. My oath is to the Constitution, not to any particular person.
If at any point the Attorney General or the President or the Department rules about succession would ever have you in the line of authority over the Mueller investigation, is it appropriate for us to take your opening testimony and your response to Chairman Grassley as saying that within the next 2 years you would be obligated to recuse from oversight of Mueller's investigation?
I think it's fair to say for the next 2 years that I would be recused from any matter related to Alpha Bank or any other client, and that thereafter I would have to consult with the career officials at the department on a case-by-case basis. Again, because I don't know the subject matter of Special Prosecutor Mueller's investigation at this point. But I pledge to you that I would be mindful of those obligations the moment I got to the department. And if we ever ended up in the situation that you've described, Senator Sask, that I would steadfastly review the facts, consult with the career ethics officials at the department, and if I was required to recuse, I would recuse.
Thank you. I have follow-on questions to that, but I'm supposed to take over chairing this for Chairman Grassley, and so I need to honor the fact that I'm out of time. Mr. Durbin.
Thank you, Senator Sask. Mr. Benchkowski, it seems like every time we open a door in Washington, we find another Russian. And I want to ask you about one. Mikhail Fridman. What do you know about him?
All I know, Senator, is that he is one of the founders of Alpha Bank. I've never spoken to or met Mr. Fridman.
Did you do any investigation or inquiry as to this individual before accepting Alpha Bank as a client?
Well, the firm accepted Alpha Bank as a client before I was aware that we were representing them. As is the case with every law firm and every matter that comes before my firm, there's a screening process that takes place, and I'm confident that that screening process was robust.
Personally, did you do any background check or any due diligence on Mr. Fridman?
I did not, other than to familiarize myself with the allegations that had been made against the bank.
If you did a cursory search of Mr. Fridman, you would find that he's been referred to as Vladimir Putin's favorite oligarch. You'd also find that Vladimir Putin made a point of flying to London, England to be present when Mr. Fridman, the head of Alpha Bank, signed the biggest deal of his life involving British Petroleum. That is a matter of public record. The reason I raise that is because I cannot understand your decision-making, the sequence of events. You've just told us that you were well aware of the intelligence community conclusion about the involvement of Russians in the presidential campaign and their favoritism toward the Trump campaign. That was public record in the 14-page document which you referred to. It was after your key role in the transition, being the lead when it came to the transition of the Department of Justice, that you returned to this law firm. And with that knowledge, were asked in March of this year if you would accept Alpha Bank as a client. Something is missing from that recounting. As you left the transition, you made an inquiry as to whether the Department of Justice would hire you, did you not?
As I left the transition, there was a point where I had expressed an interest in a job as U.S. Attorney.
All right.
That expression of interest, I never interviewed with anybody at the Justice Department. I never interviewed with anybody at the White House in that regard. And I
left the transition
and returned to private practice.
You have made it clear to someone in the Department of Justice that you're interested in being a U.S. Attorney, and you returned to this private law firm.
Correct.
You know at the time that your former boss, Jeff Sessions, State Senator Jeff Sessions, is now the Attorney General, soon to be the Attorney General. I would guess, having been through the transition and with your background, it looked like you had a pretty good chance for a position in the Department of Justice. Still, you made the decision in March of this year to represent Alpha Bank, a bank which had been connected to the allegations of some coordination between the Russians and the Trump campaign. Is that true?
Well, Senator, nothing's guaranteed in this world. And I returned to private practice with the understanding that I was going to be a lawyer in private practice. the opportunity to serve and the question that I received about possibly being the nominee for this position didn't come until April.
I'm going to get to that. But in the meantime, you have made it clear you'd like to be part of the Department of Justice as a U.S. Attorney. You were aware of the involvement of the Russians and the intelligence community decisions, and you still decide, when Viet Dinh asked, to take on as a client Alpha Bank. Then comes the notification from the Department of Justice that you're being considered to head of the criminal division, the reason that you're here today. And you continue to represent Alpha Bank. It would seem to me that common sense and basic caution would have suggested to you the first time Viet Dinh called, no thank you. I have an outstanding ask at the Department of Justice to be part of this administration. Why would I want to represent a Russian bank that's at least suspected to be engaged in communications with the Trump campaign? It seems so obvious to me, but it didn't lead to your decision to say no. You said, yes, I'll represent Alpha Bank. Can you explain it?
Senator, that's the type of work that I've been doing in private practice for the last 7 years. And I was comfortable taking on the representation. One, because I've known Viet Dinh for 20 years. Two, this is squarely in the wheelhouse of the type of work that I did in private practice.
But the client was a Russian bank that is under suspicion of having a direct connection with the Trump campaign. I've asked Senator Grassley, incidentally, and we're going to get a briefing as to what exactly they know, if anything, in both the law enforcement and intelligence communities. But with this basic knowledge, you made the decision to represent this bank, which seems to me an odd, inexplicable decision by you in light of all the suspicions and all the investigations underway.
Well, Senator, I'll say this.
And we're at time, so this should be a brief answer, please.
Senator, as I was asked to undertake this representation, I was aware that there had been a previous investigation by another law firm and by a very respected computer forensics firm called Mandiant that had looked at the 2016 allegations and found them to be inaccurate and that there to be nothing to it. So when the client and Viet came to me to ask me to work on this, I was comfortable accepting the representation and the work.
Senator, tell us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Schwartz, and Ms. Frederick. Look forward to supporting your nomination. I think you'll see where this process is going right now. Mr. Benczkowski, I want to go back. You, in fact, didn't make the decision within your firm to represent Alpha Bank. Is that correct?
That's correct, Senator.
You were asked specifically to come in and head a part of the services to the client that had to do with the cyber intrusion, working with a third-party firm that has former FBI and U.S. attorneys in it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Can you give me a brief description of the results of that investigation?
The Strauss-Friedberg,
I mean, really brief.
the Strauss-Friedberg found that there, once again, was no communication link between the Trump organization and Alpha Bank.
Did you communicate with anyone in Russia in process of executing your duties of supervising this subset of the overall service to the client?
Only on a very limited basis at the outset of the engagement to explain to the client what the scope would be and to deal with business issues like getting that firm paid.
How did you get the information about the investigation?
I got the information from Strauss-Friedberg, who communicated directly with the bank to get the information that they needed to conduct their review.
Did you, during that time, did you discuss the Russian investigation with anyone in the DOJ transition?
I hadn't discussed the Russian investigation with anyone during the DOJ transition.
Did you discuss it with anybody in the Trump transition?
No, sir.
Did you meet with any Russian nationals during this transition?
No.
I could go on, but I think we can get the theme from that. You know, all of us up here agree with the importance of keeping the DOJ's pursuit of the Department of Justice, I say, free from political influence. You've served in the DOJ under Attorney General Mukasey, and you worked precisely on that issue. In 2007, General Mukasey signed a memo governing contacts between the department and the White House. And I believe Senator Whitehouse called this work a significant step towards restoring America's confidence in the integrity of our justice system. talk to us a little bit in the time remaining about your work with Attorney General Mukasey and the lessons you learned from it.
Thank you, Senator. You were correct. The issue of the appropriate level of contacts between the White House and the Justice Department came to rise during my service at the department. And when Attorney General Mukasey took over, because of the issues that were raised at that time, we worked on a new memo that laid out the appropriate level of contacts between the White House and the Justice Department. Incredibly important set of rules that protect the institutional integrity and independence of the Justice Department and its decision-making processes in criminal and civil cases. It was an important piece of work. It's a piece of work that I believe has endured and continues to form the basis, the underlying basis for these same contact rules between the White House and the Justice Department. And you have my assurance, Senator, if I'm confirmed as the head of the criminal division, which handles some of the most sensitive cases in the department, that I understand those rules and I will abide by them, largely because I helped write them and I've helped enforce them.
Thank you. Now, I just want to go back again to more or less restate what I did in the opening discussion and the time remaining. How big is the law firm you're working for?
It's got roughly 1,500 lawyers worldwide.
Okay, and your colleague who decided to take on Alpha Bank as a client, did that independent of your consultation?
He did. I learned again about the representation from my partner after it had been cemented.
And after the decision was made to take on Alpha Bank as a client, because of your past experience, your expertise, you were asked to supervise a very specific area of the relationship with the clients that had to do with the cyber intrusion.
That's correct.
And in the process of all of that, your communications with any Russian national, I think, may have been limited to an email update?
That's correct.
On the status of the investigation?
That's right. Otherwise, I had no contact with the client in Russia.
Thank you.
Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you. I'm afraid, Mr. Benczkowski, you're going to continue to be the center of attention today. You come before us at a time when the Department of Justice, as an institution, is under intense pressure. So far, I believe it has withstood that pressure quite well, but just in the last few days, the President of the United States has been threatening publicly the Attorney General of the United States out of frustration over a Department of Justice / special counsel investigation that is pointed at the conduct of the President of the United States and his campaign. So that's kind of a rich mix at this point. And you step into it with a confluence of factors that cause me concern. The first is that you appear to have very little criminal prosecution experience. I don't think you've ever tried a criminal case, have you?
I have not, Senator.
And I don't think you've ever presented a case to a grand jury, have you?
I have not.
Okay, so whoever has selected you for this position, fair to say they did not do it on the basis of your criminal prosecutive experience.
I think, Senator, that, as I said in my opening statement, this would be my 6th leadership and management position at the Justice Department.
Correct, but not criminal prosecutive experience. That wouldn't be your strong suit, you wouldn't argue.
No, but in my previous work at the department, I certainly participated.
Yeah, I understand. So let me get to the second thing, which is that you have a relationship with Attorney General Sessions outside of department chain of command. You were his staff director for years on this committee, and you have that relationship with an Attorney General who has recused himself from the investigation that is the subject of all this pressure. That's correct.
I think that's fair, Senator.
So next we have the question of the position that you're coming into, Chief of Criminal Division, if you are confirmed, and what relationship that position will have with Special Counsel. We know that the acting Attorney General, the Deputy Attorney General, still has connections into the Special Counsel investigation. We've seen those. We have every reason to believe that the National Security Division has contacts into the Special Counsel investigation because of the counterintelligence component and because Dana Bennett used to run it. So, and I wrote a letter to the department in May 26, following up on a failed response by the department to get back to me with a description of what is the contour between the special counsel investigation and the rest of the department. No answer. I asked Deputy Rosenstein particularly about this. He said he'd answer it. I sent a follow-up letter when he didn't. May 26th, still no answer to it. Clearly that special counsel investigation is not fully firewalled because both Rosenstein and Bente likely have access to it. So it raises a very distinct probability that you as criminal chief may also have visibility into the special counsel investigation. What do you think your visibility into the special counsel investigation will be as criminal chief?
I don't know the answer to that question. So
okay, so that's a pretty big question mark for us here. And let me put the letter to Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein into the record, because we deserve answers to these things. This is not a hard question to answer. We haven't gotten an answer. Without objection. The fourth piece is you've got this undisclosed, now disclosed, Alpha Bank relationship, which may not reflect mischief on your part, but may well reflect an effort at mischief on Alpha Bank's part. They are a part of the oligarch establishment of Vladimir Putin. They know you were leading the transition team, and they come to your firm, and somebody asked for you. I don't know if it was them or not. But so there's that relationship. And finally, the fifth piece is that when you worked for Attorney General Mukasey, we did fix the problem of the disclosures back and forth. But something else happened while you were Chief of Staff that concerns me. The OPR and OIG investigations into the U.S. Attorney firings had gone forward to the point where the OIG and the OPR jointly had asked the White House for investigative materials. And the White House refused. The White House was asked to provide materials relevant to an ongoing Department of Justice OIG, OPR investigation and refused. And the response to that by Attorney General Mukasey was to walk away. To me, there's only one response for an Attorney General to that, and that's to walk down to the White House and say, one of two things is going to happen this afternoon. You're going to give us access to those investigative documents that we need, or I'm going to resign as Attorney General. There's no other way out of that. So the fact that you were the Chief of Staff to an Attorney General who blanched and backed away when the White House said no to a DOJ investigation, you put those five things into context, and I got to tell you, sir, we got a lot of questions that we're going to have to go through before I'll be comfortable voting for you. I hope that you'll cooperate with us in getting those questions answered. It may be that they're good answers to all of them, but I hope you see that when you stack all those things up, that is a confluence that is very concerning at a time when we have a President of the United States attacking the Attorney General, his own Attorney General of the United States, to put pressure on an investigation back to the President. Is that a fair request that you cooperate with answering those questions?
Senator, I will endeavor.
We're at time, so if you want to offer a brief answer.
I'll endeavor to get you answers to whatever questions I can answer in
That's
connection
all I
with my
need to hear,
knowledge.
and we'll keep at this and try to get it settled. But thank you very much, and I appreciate the Chairman's indulgence for the extra minute.
Senator Kennedy.
Mr. Bienkowski, do you support the FBI investigation?
I support the Special Counsel Mueller's investigation.
Yes.
I do.
Let me just ask you directly what's being implied here. Are you being hired to interfere with that investigation?
Absolutely not, Senator, and if I were asked to do anything like that, I would steadfastly refuse.
Thank you. Is it Ms. Friedrich or Frederick?
Friedrich.
Friedrich. Ms. Friedrich, I wanted to ask you and Mr. Schwartz a quick question. Part of our job here, which I think we all take seriously, is to, within 5 minutes, judge your demeanor and judgment. And that requires you to answer questions. Let's suppose that you're both being asked to, or have been asked to teach a constitutional law class at your alma mater, with Yale and Chicago, right? Great schools. And one of your students asked you, you're talking about the Constitution. One of your students asked you, do you believe there are unenumerated rights in the United States Constitution? What are you going to tell them?
Senator, as a judge.
I'm not asking as a judge. I'm asking as a law professor.
Senator, I think Senator, as a judge who's functioning as a law professor, a judge.
No, I suppose you're not on the bench. You're just a law professor.
Well, Senator, here I'm a nominee for judicial position, so for me